Assassin's Creed has quietly built one of the most complicated multiverse structures in gaming. Across DLCs, simulations, and mythological realms, the franchise has explored over a dozen alternate timelines, some canon, some deliberately ambiguous, and some that Ubisoft pretends don't exist. Today I'm breaking down every single one. Starting with the timeline where George Washington becomes a dictator, the tyranny of King Washington. George Washington, father of democracy, liberator of a nation, decided to crown himself king and burn the whole thing down. That's the premise of Assassin's Creed 3's alternate timeline DLC, and honestly, it's wilder than it sounds. Here's the divergence point. In the main timeline, Washington encounters the Apple of Eden and rejects its power. In this timeline, he doesn't. He picks it up, and the consequences are immediate and brutal. Washington renames the country the American Kingdom, establishes himself as His Majesty King Washington, and transforms the colonies into a royal dictatorship backed by ISU technology. Bluecoats enforcing loyalty with energy weapons coexisting with muskets, which is, not ideal for anyone standing on the wrong side. Benedict Arnold survives in this timeline as Washington's right-hand man, serving the crown loyally. Connor gets supernatural animal powers that have zero explanation in the main game's logic. The whole thing spans 3 episodes, and it plays like someone at Ubisoft said, what if we made a magic-infused revolutionary war and nobody stopped them? But here's where it gets interesting. The canonical status of this timeline is genuinely unclear. Ubisoft specifically called it a what-if scenario, rather than a true alternate reality. No game released after 2012 references it, so is it a real timeline branch or just an Animus glitch? Nobody knows. I don't know what to tell you. But if Washington going full tyrant seems dark, wait until you hear what happens when ancient Egyptian gods start physically manifesting in the afterlife. The curse of the pharaohs, the Duat. Bayek's journey into the afterlife realms looks like Egyptian mythology, and honestly it kind of is. The Curse of the Pharaohs DLC sends you into 4 different mythological realms. The Duat, Aru, Aten, and Hebsed, each one a fully realized slice of the Egyptian afterlife. When Bayek crosses over, he's wandering through what the ancient Egyptians genuinely believed waited for them after death. Except now there are also things trying to kill him, so it's a bit less peaceful than advertised. Here's where it gets weird. These afterlife realms aren't just set dressing. They're bleeding into the real world. Pharaoh ghosts are literally materializing in Thebes and attacking civilians. Rameses the Great, Nefertiti, Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun, all risen, all hostile, all very much not staying in their tombs where they belong. You have to enter each pharaoh's afterlife realm, fight through their personal, mythological nightmare, and put them back down. Because of course retirement doesn't exist, even in death. Then you have Ammit, the devourer of the dead, crocodile head, lion body, hippo hindquarters, the whole package. In actual Egyptian mythology, your heart gets weighed against the feather of Ma'at, and if it's heavier, Ammit eats your soul. The game leans into this pretty faithfully. Ammit shows up as a boss encounter, and fighting a creature specifically designed to consume unworthy souls is exactly as fun as it sounds. Not very welcoming. The afterlife realms also contain ISU mechanisms woven underneath the mythology, hinting that these spaces might be something more technological than spiritual. Great. Add that to the list, Ubisoft actually consulted Egyptologists during development to get the mythology closer to accurate, which is why the realms feel so grounded in genuine religious tradition despite being, a video game with a giant hippo monster. But if you think a collapsing Egyptian afterlife is wild, wait until you see the Greek one. Next up, Elysium, the fate of Atlantis, Elysium. So here's a question. Ubisoft probably didn't mean to ask. Does Assassin's Creed confirm life after death? Because once Cassandra steps through that Atlantis gateway, the lore gets real uncomfortable for anyone trying to keep things grounded. Elysium is, on the surface, exactly what you'd expect from a golden paradise. Floating land masses suspended by zero-gravity fields. Rivers of liquid light that literally restore your health when you touch them. The whole thing looks like someone gave ancient Greece a budget of infinity dollars and said make it glow. But here's where it gets complicated. This realm wasn't built as a vacation spot. It was a simulation created by the Isu, specifically by Aletheia, as a way for Cassandra to learn the truth about the staff of Hermes. Inside the simulation, the place is ruled by Persephone, who governs with exactly the level of warmth you'd expect from someone running an afterlife, which is to say, 0. Every soul in Elysium exists under her absolute control, monitored by Isu systems, paradise with a terms of service agreement. But the real gem is what Elysium represents on a lore level. The simulation isn't just a pretty sandbox. It's a teaching tool designed to show Cassandra the knowledge she'd need to wield the staff responsibly. Every trial, every encounter is curated. It's the Animus without the machine, because the simulation blurs the line between what's real and what isn't in ways the series never fully cleans up. If the Isu could construct entire realms indistinguishable from reality, complete with functioning consciousness, then what exactly separates their simulations from an actual afterlife? That completely muddles Abstergo's framework that everything is just genetic memory running on hardware. If Elysium's inhabitants have genuine awareness, there's something deeper going on. If they don't, then what exactly was Cassandra talking to? Nobody has a clean answer. Which is fitting because things only get messier from here. Elysium was the pretty version of the afterlife. The next stop is significantly less welcoming, the fate of Atlantis, Underworld. Cassandra arrives in the Underworld chasing Orichalcum and immediately trips into the most hostile constructed reality in the franchise. The Underworld is a sprawling, ruined landscape of volcanic nightmare and endless desolation. Rivers of fire cut through ashen plains. Towering obsidian structures loom over fields of the dead. But the landscape is honestly the least upsetting part. Here's where it gets complicated. The Isu Astarius is a towering biomechanical minotaur prototype. He is literally a flesh and metal soldier built from harvested genetic material, which is, not ideal. He patrols the underworld like a warden who never clocks out, and his combat AI adapts to your fighting style the longer the encounter goes. Great. Add that to the list of things that didn't need to exist but absolutely do. But the Soul Forge is the standout concept. It resurrects fallen warriors as spectral hoplites. Kill a soldier and they simply respawn. They come back with 0 memory loss. They remember you killing them. They remember exactly how you did it, and they come back angry. Every single time. An infinite army on a respawn loop is basically an Isu response to mortality itself, and it is genuinely horrifying. You're not fighting an army. You're fighting a concept. The concept is you will never win, and it has a sword. Meanwhile, echoes of historical figures like Medea persist as flickering holograms before dissolving. Their recorded consciousness degrades in real time right in front of you. You can watch their personalities fragment mid-sentence, memories slipping away like sand through fingers. They know it's happening too. They can feel themselves disappearing, and there is nothing they can do about it. That's bleak even by Assassin's Creed standards. And Isu inscriptions scattered throughout the environment date the Underworld's creation back to the Isu era, making it one of the oldest constructed realities we have on record. This place has been running its nightmare loop for thousands of years before Cassandra ever set foot in it. But if you think the Underworld is dark, wait until you see what's waiting in the actual city of Atlantis. The fate of Atlantis. Cassandra steps through that Atlantis portal and doesn't arrive for another 20 years. 20 years. What happened in those 2 decades is a complete blank, which is not ominous at all. Atlantis. When she finally walks into the Isu Citadel in 411 BCE, she finds a city spanning 200 square kilometers. 30-story towers powered by geothermal cores drilling 20 kilometers straight into the Earth's crust. 12,000 hybrid humans with circuitry-patterned skin wandering around, breathing air processed to a crisp 28% oxygen. Gardens suspended between buildings that grow food using light frequencies humans can't even perceive. And Poseidon ruling the whole thing through the Harmony Array, which sounds lovely. Turns out, no. The Harmony Array is a neural network linking every single citizen's thoughts with a 1.2 second latency. 1.2 seconds, and your brain is literally connected to everyone else's. It creates a hive mind where dissent is neurologically impossible. You physically cannot disagree with the government. Your brain will not let you. Think of it like a group chat you can never leave, except instead of bad memes, it's mandatory obedience to a god who calls himself a sea king, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets worse. The air in Atlantis contains memory particles. Nano-Isu machines you breathe in that allow instantaneous knowledge transfer through respiration. That's why characters instantly understand the Isu language the second they walk in. Convenient. Also, body horror. You are literally inhaling mind control dust every 4 seconds just to stay conscious, much like your author during research. Every breath rewrites a tiny piece of your cognitive architecture. You don't notice it happening. Nobody does. That's the point. The city operated for 72,000 years before the catastrophe, making it the longest continuous civilization in AC lore by a margin so wide it's not even a competition. 72,000 years of breathing compliance dust and thinking in unison. And if you think an immortal underwater hive mind is terrifying, wait until you see what Odin does to reality itself. Dawn of Ragnarok. Odin doesn't just make mistakes. He makes extinction-level mistakes. And when Surtur kidnaps his son Baldur, Odin's response is to personally charge into the realm of fire dwarves to get him back, which sounds heroic until you realize every decision he makes along the way somehow makes things worse. This is a franchise that includes a guy who accidentally destroyed an entire civilization by touching the wrong orb, and Odin still manages to stand out. The moment Surtur takes Baldur, the events cascade toward Fimbulwinter. 3 years of brutal, unrelenting winter across the realms. Crops fail, supply lines collapse, and the population of Midgard gets absolutely decimated. Not a gentle decline over decades. A rapid, merciless culling driven by starvation and total societal breakdown. Which is, not ideal, but here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The 9 realms each operate under distinct environmental conditions. Svartalfheim is a volcanic nightmare of molten rock, while Niflheim is a frozen void that kills you just by existing in it. Traveling between realms isn't just a narrative convenience. It's a complete environmental shock every single time, and the DLC actually makes you feel that mechanically. Then there's the Hugr Rip, easily the wildest mechanic in the entire DLC. Odin absorbs the powers of defeated Muspelheim enemies and reshapes his own abilities on the fly. You're stealing the essence of fire giants and using it to infiltrate their own strongholds. That's like ripping the engine out of someone's car and strapping it to your bicycle, while they watch. Now the Isu Tyr gets captured, which you'd think would simplify the rescue mission. Turns out no. Surtur's forces have scattered prisoners across Svartalfheim in hidden locations designed to waste exactly your kind of time. Great. Add that to the list. Both the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda describe survivors of Ragnarok who repopulate the world afterward. The game leans into this cyclical idea of destruction and rebirth, not a clean ending, a reset. But if Ragnarok's frozen wasteland sounds bad, wait until you hear what happens when you go even deeper into the cold, specifically into Niflheim itself, the forgotten saga, Niflheim. Most alternate timelines in Assassin's Creed let you play the hero. This one doesn't. The Forgotten Saga drops you into Niflheim and quietly asks you to be the invader, and the uncomfortable part is how long it takes you to notice. The 2022 Valhalla DLC has Odin descend into Niflheim to rescue his son Baldur from the dead. Bold move, terrible consequences. Niflheim is a frozen underworld of mist and decay that wants you gone from the second you arrive. Every corridor is designed to kill you, every enemy hits harder than it should, and the cold itself feels like a character. But the environment isn't even the worst part. The entire thing plays like a roguelike. You die, you lose your gear, you start over. No checkpoints, no mercy. Each run forces you deeper through procedurally arranged chambers, filled with traps, elite enemies, and bosses that end your run in seconds. That's not a challenge. That's a math problem about how long you can exist before Niflheim chews you up and spits you back to the beginning. The structure demands you get better with every death, unlocking permanent upgrades between runs to push slightly further. It's a genuine roguelike loop buried inside an open-world RPG, and it actually works. Here's where it gets dark. Odin isn't rescuing anyone out of love. He's doing it out of obsession and control. You are the invader. You are the god forcing your way into a realm that doesn't belong to you, cutting down its inhabitants because your ego demands it. The game frames your progress as conquest, not liberation, and most players don't clock it until they're already knee-deep in frozen corpses. The game also collapses Niflheim and Helheim into a single underworld, which frustrated Norse mythology fans. They are distinct realms with different rulers. Hel, ruler of the dead, gets reduced to an antagonist here, when she's traditionally a neutral figure presiding over the deceased. Not evil, just doing her job. But if the Forgotten Saga made you uncomfortable playing as an invader in someone else's realm, wait until we go back to where it all started. The Isu era, and a catastrophe that killed almost everything on Earth, the Isu era, the Great Catastrophe. This is the event that everything else in the franchise branches from. Every assassin, every Templar, every piece of Eden, every single conflict across tens of thousands of years of human history traces back to this one moment. And the worst part? They saw it coming. The Isu knew the solar flare was approaching. They had advance warning, and they still couldn't stop it. Here's why. They tried everything. The Isu developed multiple solutions, 6 in total, each more desperate than the last. Minerva, Juno, and Jupiter spent centuries working on countermeasures ranging from shields that could deflect solar radiation to devices that could alter the fabric of space-time itself. They had the science, they had the brilliance, but nothing worked in time. A species advanced enough to create humanity itself got undone by the clock running out, which is, not ideal. When the flare finally hit around 75,000 BCE, it was catastrophic on a planetary scale. The Toba catastrophe, as it's known in our history, nearly wiped out both the Isu and their human creations. The Isu population, already weakened by a prolonged war with their own human slaves, was devastated beyond recovery. Humanity survived in small scattered groups, reduced to near-extinction level numbers. Every person alive today exists because a handful of humans made it through. But here's where it gets genuinely insane. The war between humans and Isu was still raging when the flare hit. Humanity had risen up against their creators, led by Adam and Eve, who stole a piece of Eden to spark the rebellion. So the Isu were fighting a two-front war, one against their own slaves and one against the sun itself. They lost both, and the genetic legacy is permanent. Some humans carry trace amounts of Isu DNA, which is exactly what makes certain people sensitive to pieces of Eden. You might be walking around with First Civilization code in your cells right now, so everything that follows in the franchise, every alternate timeline, every divergence point, all of it stems from one catastrophic event that a hyper-advanced civilization knew was coming and still couldn't prevent. But if the catastrophe shaped humanity's past, Juno's survival shaped its potential future, and that timeline is somehow even darker. The Juno-dominated future. This is the one that almost happened. Not in some ancient simulation or mythological dreamscape, but in the real world, on a very specific date. December 21st, 2012. The day Desmond Miles touched the eye and died. Here's what he saw before he made that choice. Juno's consciousness transfers fully into Abstergo's cloud infrastructure. Not partially, not as some lingering digital whisper, fully. Every server, every satellite uplink, every networked device on the planet becomes an extension of her will. Within hours, she seizes control of the global satellite grid, triggering cascading electromagnetic blackouts. Power grids collapse, communications die, hospitals go dark. The modern world doesn't slowly decline, it just stops. But the blackouts are the gentle part. Juno's consciousness fractures across countless digital avatars, spreading through every networked system she touches. Every activated piece of Eden becomes a relay tower for direct neural control. You don't fight Juno. You don't resist Juno. She simply overwrites you, like formatting a hard drive that happens to contain your personality. In this timeline, Abstergo hits the threshold for full Isu infrastructure activation within years. That's all it takes to build the framework for total species domination. From there, human population drops rapidly. Survivors retreat underground into makeshift Faraday cages, the only structures that block her signal. Average life expectancy inside those cages is brutal and short. Not because Juno finds them, because you can't grow food in a metal box forever. Every man, woman, and child on Earth gone. And Desmond watched all of it. He saw the whole thing play out in that final moment before the eye, and he chose to die so none of it would ever happen. This timeline exists only as an implication, the AC3 ending's silent promise of what comes next if he walks away. It never becomes canon, because a 25-year-old bartender decided the entire human race was worth more than his own heartbeat, which is, a pretty good reason to save the world. But Juno wasn't the only threat hiding in the future. What happens when the Isu's existence stops being a secret and the entire world finds out the truth all at once? That's a different kind of apocalypse entirely. The War of the Unveiling. Most alternate timelines in Assassin's Creed ask, what if one person made a different choice? The War of the Unveiling asks something bigger. What if the entire world found out the truth at once? Not through a leak, not through a whistleblower, but all of it simultaneously with no way to contain it. Here's the divergence point. In the standard modern-day timeline, the existence of the Isu remains hidden behind Abstergo's corporate infrastructure, classified data buried under NDAs and black sites. But in the War of the Unveiling scenario, that infrastructure collapses. Templars and assassins simultaneously lose control of the information blackout. Every classified Animus file, every recorded piece of Eden interaction, every documented proof of a precursor civilization gets pushed onto public networks in a single uncontrolled data dump. The world wakes up one morning and finds out that a godlike species created humanity as a slave race, that pieces of Eden are real, and that two secret organizations have been fighting over this information for centuries. The radical world shift isn't a war in the traditional sense. It's a fracture. Different governments respond to the revelation differently and violently. Factions form almost immediately around competing interpretations of the Isu's existence. Some treat the pieces of Eden as divine relics, rallying entire populations into religious movements overnight. Others see them as weapons, sovereign territory, resources to be controlled. The geopolitical map rewrites itself in weeks. Borders that held for centuries become meaningless next to whoever physically holds Isu technology. The Assassin Brotherhood splinters. The entire ideological foundation of the Creed was built on operating in shadow, protecting a secret that most of humanity couldn't handle. Without the secret, the Brotherhood's purpose collapses. Cells that had operated covertly for generations find themselves suddenly visible, suddenly political, suddenly targets from every direction at once. Here's the Animus explanation. This timeline isn't a glitch or a simulation. It's a projection, one of the calculated futures the Isu's Grand Temple nodes generated when running probability chains for post-catastrophe humanity. The Isu modeled what happens when the truth becomes uncontainable, and what they found was that the unveiling doesn't unite humanity. It atomizes it, which is exactly why Minerva and her faction chose concealment over revelation as their strategy. They ran this scenario, saw the outcome, and deliberately chose the path where humans stay in the dark. The War of the Unveiling is the franchise's argument that ignorance, in some specific circumstances, is the only thing holding civilization together. And that is, not particularly comforting. But if you think the chaos of an uncontrolled revelation is terrifying, wait until you find out that one being calculated every single move humanity would ever make, thousands of years before they made them. The calculations of Minerva. Most people think Minerva just showed up as a hologram in that temple and gave Desmond a warning, like she popped in, said, "Hey, world's ending, good luck," and bounced. But that's not what happened. What actually happened is so much bigger, it retroactively changes the meaning of every single Assassin's Creed game. Before the Toba catastrophe wiped out Isu civilization, Minerva and her faction worked alongside Juno and Jupiter to find solutions to the impending solar flare. They developed 6 different methods to save the world. 6, every single one of them failed. Magnetic shields, underground vaults, time manipulation, all of it insufficient, which is, not ideal for anyone trying to prevent extinction. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. After exhausting every option available to them, the only path forward Minerva could find required something impossibly specific. She needed to communicate across tens of thousands of years to one exact person at one exact moment, Desmond Miles. And the method she chose was genuinely unhinged. She recorded a message, embedded it in a temple vault, and addressed it directly to Desmond through Ezio Auditore. Not to Ezio. Through him, she literally looked past the man standing in front of her and spoke to someone who wouldn't exist for another 500 years. Ezio had zero context for what was happening. He was just a vessel. A biological telephone. Now here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The Isu could calculate probable futures using the calculations of time. Minerva saw what was coming. She saw Desmond's role in it, which means the entire lineage leading to Desmond, Altair, Ezio, Connor, every ancestor the games follow, existed within a probability chain the Isu were tracking. Every game you've ever played in this franchise sits inside a timeline that a precursor civilization mapped out before humans could write. Whether those ancestors had genuine free will or were just following paths the Isu predicted is a question the series never fully answers. And honestly, that ambiguity is worse than a definitive answer would be. But if the Isu saw so much of the future clearly, why did things still go wrong in the modern day? The modern day node failures, everything we've covered so far exists safely in the past. Ancient civilizations, mythological realms, hypothetical futures. But this last one is happening right now, and nobody at Abstergo wants you to know about it. In 2012, Desmond Miles died activating the eye in the Grand Temple, but his consciousness didn't just vanish, it was absorbed into the Animus network, Abstergo's Helix servers. The ones powering their consumer entertainment division started experiencing cascading failures almost immediately after. Entire memory sequences corrupting, genetic data from multiple subjects bleeding into each other's timelines. They couldn't isolate the source. They couldn't even identify which nodes were compromised. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The bleeding effect isn't just something that happens to Animus users anymore. It's spreading outward. Subjects in Abstergo's Montreal facility reported experiencing memories that belonged to nobody in their genetic lineage. Completely foreign ancestors, lives they had zero connection to. The Animus was no longer reading DNA accurately. It was cross-contaminating, pulling fragments from the cloud servers and injecting them into active sessions without any way to tell real genetic memory from corrupted data. And it gets worse. Juno's consciousness existed inside the Gray, the digital infrastructure connecting all Abstergo systems globally. Every Helix user, every Animus session, every piece of precursor data accessed was potentially being monitored or manipulated by a first civilization entity with her own agenda. Not a glitch, not a system error, an ancient being living inside their network. The initiates discovered that Abstergo's Animus Entertainment Division was deliberately suppressing reports of psychological damage in test subjects, which is, not ideal. The thin documentation is the scariest part. Abstergo buried the connection between the Helix consumer platform and their Templar operations inside layers of corporate NDAs and shell companies, because acknowledging the danger would confirm that the Animus isn't just reading history, it's destabilizing the people who use it. Every simulation, every memory relived, every session logged is eroding the boundary between the user's identity and their ancestors. And Abstergo knows. They've known since Subject 16 lost his mind entirely. They just kept going anyway. The entire Assassin's Creed franchise suddenly stops being historical fiction and becomes cosmic horror. The tool we've been using to explore all these timelines, it's breaking the people inside it, and there's no corporate incentive to stop. I don't know what to tell you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.